Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business. Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to the Pest Geek podcast. I am your host, Frank Hernandez. Hey, we're going to be discussing organic lawn care in a wave of cosmetic pesticide bans across Canada and the U.S. And before that, I want to remind our audience, hey, don't forget to go to the pestgeekpodcast.com. Check us out there. And if you can and you enjoy this ad-free Pest Geek podcast, and we've been doing it now for 5 years, over 285 podcasts with no ads. And we've been totally sustaining this ourselves. But hey, if you want to help and you want to keep this content on the air the way we're doing it, go to the Pest Geek podcast, hit the donate button, and any amount that you feel that you want to donate. We're using Patreon. You can find us on patreon.com. /Pest Geek Podcast. If you want to go directly there, we greatly appreciate anything you can do as we're doing more things. And we're trying to bring in quality people on this podcast as Steven Van Tassel. But as you know, hey, some people do need to get paid for their work because their work is valuable. My work is valuable. However, I don't have a need to, based on my business, to have this podcast support me. My business supports me, just like your business supports you. But if we're wanting to bring people on, we're wanting to bring the best content that we can. We're looking at starting to pay people for being here on the air with us, especially if they're making a serious commitment to be on the podcast. And we want to be able to bring you the finest free service, but we don't feel like we want to be charging everybody to listen for a download. So that's not what we're doing. So I just want for you guys to know, also we'll be putting out some quality products as the Pest Geek Academy. We're going to be doing that, but I'm trying to make sure that we keep it ad-free. We don't feel like promoting any chemical product in the industry one over the other. I don't want to go through that entire process because obviously we can't, and then that's just a logistical nightmare for us. So not interested in that aspect of it, but just thought I'd let you know this is what we're doing. A lot of you, who have not listened to us ever from the 285 podcasts that we've done, I think we're going to hit 290 pretty soon, have never ever, sold a product except once on the air, and that was it. So, support us, and also check out Pest Geek Podcast on Facebook, the listeners group. Become a member of the listeners group. We're going to be putting some stuff in there that it's only going to be exclusive for that listeners group also, and that's also free. Just become a member. So that's all. So now I want to talk to you about organic lawn care in the wave of cosmetic pesticide bans across Canada and the U.S. Canada leads the way in pesticide bans on cosmetic, what are known as, in quotes, cosmetic pesticides, meaning pesticides that are used for the exclusive purpose of beautifying and keeping a beautiful lawn or landscape. It's no different than doing what they do in golf courses and keeping those golf courses green so that people want to play on them. But there are major bans, and they've led the way since 2009, and they're coming up to their anniversary on 2000. Right now, they're already, I think, on their 10th anniversary of that, 11th actually. And I've been asked to do a podcast on how to help them with organic lawn care and what we can do in organic lawn care. And right now, there is more than ever. However, it's still very little that can be done. And I'm going to give you in a series of podcasts what I did, my process for testing those products, what you can expect, the results you can expect, especially in cool season grasses and cool season landscapes. Where here I deal with warm season grasses and mostly ornamentals, and a lot of lawn care, but mostly a lot of ornamental lawn care, where we've been able to be very, very, very successful in using organics with shrubs and plants and fruit trees and things like that versus lawn. But give you a little bit of background so that you understand what's been happening, what's going on, and how do you stay ahead of it, okay, of this, is back in 2003, Quebec was the first one to actually pass legislation in Canada for the sale of cosmetic pesticides. This was in April of 2003. And it was known as the Quebec Pesticide Management Code. And it was a phase-out project of over 3 years to phase out the sale of lawn pesticides, okay, so that people could not buy them. And so by April of 2006, this was done, and they basically said, hey, you can no longer use pesticides on your lawn except for the list that is provided of these pesticides. And there's a huge list, and I'm going to have links to all of this on my podcast. You can go to the notes, get all the links if you're interested in following that, of what products are available to be used. If you're not in Canada, or you're not in Quebec or Ontario or any of the other regions that have banned cosmetic pesticides, you can basically, if you look at 25B products here in the U.S., the equivalent of a 25B, understand that they got a different language for their law. You got to interpret that language, which I've been trying to. And it's a different, when you're reading about classes, is their own classification of classes, not mode of action classes. So you get a little confused there. But if you look at the banned pesticides, pretty much everything you use here in the U.S. synthetically is pretty much banned, other than permethrin and I think one alethrin product, and everything else is like 25B that you can use. So if you understand 25B, and there are herbicides and 25B fungicides, which we do use, and I'll talk to you about that in a future podcast, of how to use that. But the list of, they banned almost 250 products, and 95 active ingredients have been banned for cosmetic uses. The second one to do this was Ontario, to ban pesticides in 2009. Okay, so Ontario was on Earth Day, which was April 22nd, 2009. They chose that day symbolically to do the ban. And you're asking yourself, where did they get this harebrained idea in 2009? By the way, I started my company in January of 2009, which the economy tanked that year. That was a terrible year to start a business in the U.S. or anywhere. And I was already thinking about how we went organic, because I already had been toying with this idea for 3 years while I was working for somebody else. Toying with this idea to the point that I sat down with BioWorks and sat down with them, and I met one of their PhDs, Hayes, in a conference, and I sat with him, and he was so intrigued with my concept of what I wanted to do that he actually bought me lunch. And I wanted to do all this stuff, and he basically told me it couldn't be done. The reason it couldn't be done is the products aren't labeled. All the organics products they sold were only labeled for agriculture, and for nurseries, for growers. None of those products were labeled for the use in residential landscapes. Now we're talking 10 years later. They have a small line of products available to be used in landscapes. So 10 years later, we're starting to have the serious conversation about what can and can't be done with organics in the landscape. And when we talk about organics, I want you to understand that there's a big difference, huge difference. And people don't understand. They think that all 25Bs that comprises organic pest control. That is not organic pest control. It involves a lot of uses of biologicals, which in GHP, you guys have no clue about. The reason is there aren't many biological products that you use for GHP other than DSV, which is a disinfectant. And now with the use of Apprehend, Beauveria bassiana, which has been used for over 10 years in horticulture, in landscape, nurseries, and in agriculture. So now you're starting to get involved in biologicals in the residential pest control area where you haven't been. I've been doing that research and working with those for 10 years and messing around and trying to figure out what can and can't be done. And let me tell you, it's darn hard. It isn't. I mean, when we're talking about darn hard, to the 99% of you listening to me are going to try it and give up on it. That's how difficult it is. So now you have them passing all these laws, and where the heck did they get the idea of these bans? Well, it didn't start in Canada. They got the idea from us, and specifically from the state of Massachusetts. Back in 2002, Massachusetts passed a law to requiring pesticide manufacturers to reduce the toxins they use in production. Massachusetts leads the way in that aspect of radical pesticide reduction. And they published an article, Pesticide Reduction Resource Guide for Citizens and Municipalities of Massachusetts, dated May of 2002. So when you look at Massachusetts, and I tell you, keep your eye on the Northeast, keep your eye on California, it's because this is where it's going. What you see happening across entire cities and counties and regions in Canada is eventually going to happen here. And what I'm telling you is that if you don't start preparing now for the next 2 to 3 years, doing your own research and development, if you're in organic lawn care, if you're in regular lawn care, and that you need to figure out how you're going to reduce your liability in the next 10 years to go from being a lawn care company to being an outside pest control company that focuses on IPM for lawn care and exterior pest control and mosquito control, and you start becoming very, very familiar and practicing IPM for landscapes, you're going to get to a point where your exposure is going to be great. They're going to pass a ban and your company's going to go out of business in that county because you're not going to be able to survive, because you need to find alternate income sources like GHP, and probably don't allow your lawn care to be more than 20% of your business. Because when that ban comes, you can convert those clients, the majority of them, and have already tested and used, like I have for over 10 years, and know what works and what doesn't. And then you're able to sit down and have an educated discussion, because I tell you, I don't care how much you think you know, and I don't care how much your rep knows. Your rep will never be able to prepare you for switching over and stop using a pesticide and start doing organic lawn care, and what the realistic expectations are going to be and what the realistic results are going to be, and not simply saying that junk doesn't work. We did properties for a long time where we're probably 95% natural right now with 25Bs on all our ornamentals. We are drastically reduced the amount of pesticide we use on our lawns to about 66% less than the industry. Why? This is where it's going. And when we saw the writing on the wall, it said, if we want to stay in this business, which I'm really fanatical about, then we got to get fanatical about pesticide reduction and alternate methods and start bringing in products as they become available and start using and phasing out a lot of what we do over a period of time so that when this happens to us, as a company, we're positioned in the marketplace. That's my strategy. That's my 10-year strategy. Be positioned in the marketplace, reduce my exposure, be the only guy doing it, and be doing it more than anybody. This is why our company is called Nature Pest. Because I started out in lawn and ornamental because we were dealing with issues of pollinators and the biology in the landscape, because we put out so much more pesticide than a GHP company, a general household pest company, a residential pest control company ever will. Even if they're doing lawn spraying for flea and tick. You will never get close to what a lawn care company has to put out in chemical-wise when you start talking about fungicides and herbicides and miticides and fertilizers, and why we did the conversion early on, and it took us till 2013 to be able to actually launch a company and rebrand so that we actually targeted that market. And where we started targeting wasn't the general pest control market, it was lawn care. We were known exclusively as a lawn care company, not a residential pest control company. And that's why we became then an outdoor pest control company, where we pretty much control everything from the outside in. But when I'm reading the documentation later, you got also, it's not only Quebec and Ontario that has a huge problem. It is Newfoundland, Labrador, Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Alberta. All of these have now legislation for cosmetic pesticide use. And it's only going to spread. When you look at what they're allowed to use, even for indoor, I'm going to put the list up, these links, so that you can see. I mean, it pretty much comes down to 25B, baits. It comes down to a couple of pyrethroids, maybe one or two, and that's it. And there's pretty much nothing, not a whole lot you can use, even in residential pest control. So what the government says on their website regarding this at canada.ca, and here is what the government's role, Canada says, is. I'm quoting from them, okay? Health Canada work with provincial and territorial governments to create the healthy lawn strategy for urban pesticide risk reduction, with the goal of helping Canadians reduce their reliance on lawn care pesticides. This can be accomplished through the use of integrated pest management (IPM) practices, such as prevention, use of reduced risk products, and the application of pesticides only when necessary. Now, according to this statement, this is 100% factual. It can be done. It is absolutely necessary, and to use pesticides only when necessary. This is what we've done. What we've done is educate most of our customers when they want to convert to eco-friendly, okay? And what we got to go in there and do is we have to do a complete inspection of that lawn. How it's mowed. How frequently is it mowed? What the height of that lawn is mowed at. What the irrigation is like. Is the irrigation spot on? And what we have to do is consult the client and says, look, you need to fix this. You need to talk to your landscaper, and he can't come every 2 weeks here in Florida. He needs to come weekly. That's automatically going to double their budget. Okay? Think about this for a minute. We're having this conversation with a client that wants to convert to eco-friendly. What the customer has in their mind is you have a line of organic products that you're going to make a flip switch, and we're going to just basically stop using synthetics and use natural products. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. That's just a blatant lie, but that's what they got in their mind, which our literature doesn't even say that. Our literature talks about IPM for the landscape. We don't talk about using safe products. We don't even talk about, it's just that they're thinking this is what it is, because they don't understand what it takes to actually control diseases and insects and weeds and nutrition and micronutrition and macronutrition. They don't understand any of this. So we have to do a complete consultation with every client and explain to them that if they're going to convert, their irrigation system is not up to par for this. They need to modify it, change it, because it's too much water. We need to reduce the water, control the water. We control the water for the client. We say, the reason you got all this, look how dull this blade is. You can't allow your landscaper to have a dull blade. The landscaper must sharpen his blade. And they don't, because they're hiring a commercial landscaper. They need to mow it weekly. If you're doing it yourself, ideally in Florida in the rainy season, you want to mow it twice a week. At 3 inches to 4 inches, and mow it when it gets no longer than a third. It can get a third in 2 days when it rains. You'll double your lawn in a week. In 2 weeks, you got lawn rot. You can't have lawn rot and have a grown lawn that growed from 3 to 4 inches up to 6 to 7 inches and not expect to have lawn rot and not have to use a fungicide. So in order to get rid of the fungicides and eliminate that, you got to have your cultural practice spot on, your irrigation needs to be spot on, your mowing needs to be spot on. And if it isn't spot on, what we can do is we can radically reduce the fungicides and the pesticides, but you're still going to have major problems. And you got to adapt to that. So how much do you want us to radically reduce the pesticide? That's what we really offer you right now, is a radical reduction of pesticide through IPM, and only use certain pesticides when they're needed. So if you're listening to me, no more than 5% of your lawn has weeds at any time if we're on a monthly service. Because we then have to go from a bi-monthly service to a monthly service. Some properties that we have are so difficult that we need to be there every 2 weeks to deal with these properties. They're so picky, and they're so hard because we're dealing with mosquitoes, we're dealing with diseases on plants, we're dealing with rodents, we're dealing with GHP, we're dealing with lawn, we're dealing with shrub, we're dealing with palms, we're dealing with trees. And so we're there on our premium lawn care service. If they want disease control and they want us to stay on top of it, then they need to stay on top of their landscape, or they need to stay on their cultural practice, stay on top of that, be fanatical about that. They have to have a conversion experience in their mind and in their soul if they want to convert to an organic. Then what we start doing with our clients is we start working over a period of 1 to 2 years to change that soil biology and introduce biological products into the mix while we're getting rid of others. Because if you don't get rid of the fungicides, you can't bring in biological products, because fungicides will kill the natural products. So there's a weaning process, and it takes usually 2 to 3 years. Our properties that have been with us for 10, 12 years, we use almost no fungicides on those properties. Virtually none. All of our new properties, we basically have to start using fungicides because they're loaded with fungus. They got root rot, they got disease, and we have to start using it, start introducing amino acids and things into the soil to increase that soil biology, to then start weaning them off, so that in a period of 2 to 3 years, we're using very little fungicide. But it takes that long of a process. It's that long of a learning curve, because you have to change the soil biology. If you don't change the soil biology, you will never be able to correct the plant problem. Everything is in a response to your soil. So I have no problem with this. The problem that I have with the comment is that only using it when it's necessary, but if you've banned it, then it's not available for use when necessary. So now you have, not only do you use 3 to 4 products, we use 16 products in lawn care. You're going to have to need a lot more products, and you're going to get maybe, listen to me, a 50, maybe a 40 to a 75% reduction in all of this. It's not going to be that 75 to 90 that you get with regular lawn care. If you're on a quarterly service, you can forget it. You will never be able to do organic lawn care on a quarterly service. That's done. It's monthly. You're there on top of that property, babysitting that property so that you can deal with the young shoots and everything that comes out. And this is why organics and organic lawn care is primarily going to be a homeowner product, because nobody can afford to have you there. Only the elite 1%, 10% is going to be able to have you there to do that lawn care. You're going to primarily be an organic market is going to be for homeowners. The beef that I'm having, which is always the case, I always say follow the numbers, follow the money, is that in 2009, Canada had applied 62 million tons of pesticide in agriculture. To be exact, is 62,376.4. In 2017, they're at 90,838.7 tons. That's a 32% increase in 8 years. While they're banning pesticides on property, they've added another almost 30,000 tons of pesticide in agriculture. See, this is the hypocrisy. And understand that the ones who are paying for this problem, forget about the pest control industry. We do such an insignificant part of this. And lawn care really is primarily an American thing, not really big worldwide. You know, Americans are fanatical about their lawns. The one that's going to pay for this and the one that's going to eventually pay for it is all the residents. When they figure out, when they start applying these organic products, hey, this stuff doesn't work. Hey, this burns my lawn. I got now patches all over my lawn because I use this product. You see, this is not, those numbers didn't come from me. This number came from the United Nations, where they track all the pesticides used in the world. So this is where we're going. This is why you see me being fanatical about pesticide reduction, because we can either have a niche business, a unique selling proposition to those that want it now, but those are going to need it, and then be strategically positioned for what's coming, versus complaining about it, versus saying, oh, well, we just got to stand up to this. Listen, you're not going to stand up to it. By the numbers that come out all the time on every survey of how many are involved in this, basically you're going to have the tsunami on top of you before you decide to run out of its way, and it's too late. It's going to overtake you. And this is why I'm talking about it all the time and why I'm bringing it up. And I've been asked how this can happen, but I wanted to give my listeners some context of where this comes from and why I do it and why I'm warning you about it, so that you can start changing your business practices and staying ahead of this wave, and then you can ride the wave or you can be drowned by the wave. Like what happened to many lawn care companies in all these regions, where the only ones that really survived were the large national brands. A lot were just done. One day they had 3 years to adapt. They didn't adapt. They weren't able to adapt. They said, this isn't going to happen to me. Nothing's going to happen. This is all a fad. This is all going to go away. And then turns out that, they lost a lot of their business, and they're now trying to get back into it and figuring out, but everybody's pretty much adjusted that you can't control everything after 10 years. That there's certain things you're not going to have that beautiful lawn unless you're going to be on your hands and knees pulling weeds every week. It's just not going to happen. The products aren't there for you now. And so next week and in the following weeks, we're going to start getting into how to start that process of going organic with lawn care, going organic with your residential services. And what you really don't want to be is organic because the most organic, listen to me carefully, the most organic service you can ever perform is the one that you prevent. You know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of pesticide. That's the way you have to look at it. You have to be able to say, how do we prevent this? How do we educate customers? So the best customer of mine is the one that wants to convert, and then I can do this consultation over the phone and see if they're ready wholeheartedly to make this change. And right now it's people who want it and want to make the change. They don't realize how hard it's going to be, and they're not willing to change their ways. And we're getting those people that are, yes, absolutely fanatical about it. And we've got properties that are right now on 25B, on organics, on micros, on amino acids, and things that we're doing with moderately complicated landscapes. And we're getting the results. So, you know, how do you get started in this? Then we're going to cover that on the next edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. Hey, you guys have a pestacular day.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.